It's Ruby! It's Ruby! It's Ruby! It's Ruby!
I'm like, yes, Jeff, keep going. He goes, I'm like, yes, yes, Jeffy, yes.
Greetings, mortal. Are you ready to die?
Enter epic battles with
$19 for this?
Trump is economy and taxes.
You don't have to be a VIP to get more than just savings with Geico. Every customer gets 24/7 fast-friendly claim support.
Could I get a picture?
Yeah, it's not like you run into animal celebrities every day.
Stop! It's Doug the Pug! Doug!
Get more than just savings. Get more with Geico.
So today we're talking Mario Maker. But instead of opening with a joke or cringy video of me pretending to be the Star Wars kid or whatever, I wanted to let you know about a fan-made game, Mega Maker. It's a project just like Mario Maker, but obvious as an... Anyway, then best for here. A whole new console. Give it the times, bro. I know, I feel ya, bro, but as most of you already know, I love me a good math problem to solve. And what starts as just a simple premise, you'll soon see spirals out into the largest, hardest counting task Miss Allen, your math teacher, could ever devise. And without question, the largest numbers we have ever had to deal with here on Game Theory. I don't think even Nintendo has calculated this for their own game. So get ready, Miyamoto, when I tell you the final answer today, you're gonna want to change that box art to brag about just how powerful the game you created actually is. Put on your hard hats, ladies and gentlemen, and let's go! Now, obviously, the only way to figure out how many possible levels can be built in Super Mario Maker is to count them. So that's what I did. Level 1, no blocks. Level 2, one block. Level 3, 3 blocks. God damn it, I forgot the one with 2 blocks. I gotta go back and start again. And then after the universe died, collapsed, Big Bang again, expanded, died again, and repeated the process millions of times. I finally invented a time machine, traveled back to 2017, wrote this script, and booyah shaka, here we are. Clearly, manual counting like this is not gonna be an efficient use of our time. But when you stop to think about it, most math is basically just glorified counting. I mean, counting is what started math to begin with. What was originally just a system to keep track of sheep, or days of the week, or how many oversized mammoth tusks you have to barter with, has evolved into a system intricate enough to predict the orbits of planets we can barely see, make computers house the entire history of human information, and calculate the most efficient path from my house to the nearest Wendy's in mere seconds. All of this is just counting done really, really quickly. And we're gonna need to count really, really quickly because there are a ton of different things to take into account when it comes to building Super Mario Maker levels. I mean, if you're like me, your level basically amounts to creating one giant flat plane filled with a bunch of Goombas in a line so I can murder death them all with just one shell kick. But for people who truly know what they're doing, who truly get this, there are literally 4,800 different options or different combinations to choose from before you even leave the first screen. Right off the bat, there's 50 different timer settings, and then there's scrolling. Do you want the level to auto-scroll? If so, do you want it to go fast, medium, or slow? So that's another 4 options, and boom, before you blink, we're already at 200 different level possibilities, because when you're counting all things that are possible, these numbers multiply. Now, I gotta be honest, for as much as I love math and science throughout school, I always hated permutations, combinations, and probability. Hated them! So let me quickly explain for everyone who ignored Miss Allen's cringy math joke. What is this? A Kingdom Hearts title? Kingdom Hearts HD 2.8 Final Chapter Prologue 358/2 Dream Drop Distance Recoded Chain of Memories. Seriously, Final Chapter Prologue? Final Chapter Prologue. That's like almost a logical paradox. Anyway, 4 different options for each of our 200 different levels. Y'all know what to do. Multiply. 200 times 4 equals 800. Then there's... the song you want to play. Is it the underground theme, a normal grassy level, blah 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 down the line until you have 6 different course themes, which gets us to where we want it to be, 4,800 different possibilities. And we are still not ready to lay a single block or place a single enemy, since there's still the question of how big the level is going to be. Super Mario Maker level can be as short as 1 screen width of 24 blocks and as long as 10 screens of 240 blocks, with every width possibility in between. That's 240 minus 24, giving us 216 different length options. Multiplying our original 4,800 times 216 means that still, before you have placed a single Goomba, there are over 1 million different options. And while that's a horrifying figure to consider, it still hasn't topped the number of levels that have actually been built. In 2016, Nintendo counted how many levels had been made by players of the game, and the current publicly known total is over 7.2 million. 7.2 million levels in this one $60 Mario Maker game. Crazy. But hold on to your butts, because that 7.2 million is about to get left in the dust, because it is possible to create sub-areas in various levels. You know, those bonus areas with coins and different challenges and stuff. Well, those can also be 10 screens wide, or maybe they won't exist at all. That means that we have a whole nother 217 options available for our course, 216 length options, and the option of it not existing at all, bumping our previous 1,036,800 total to over 200 million. That means that if everyone who started out passionate about Super Mario Maker for that first year stayed passionate for the rest of their lives and devoted that time to making every single combination of level setup before even placing a single block on screen and managed to maintain the rate of 7.2 million levels per year, it would take over 30 years just to make every available option. And remember, we are still just talking about 200 million blank levels, different times, lengths, themes, and scrolls. For $60 or whatever Mario Maker costs these days, you are literally getting a game that has the possibility of over 224 million levels in it. That is 0.0000002 cents per level. Talk about a power. A number so huge, it actually doesn't have a name. The only number bigger is a Googleplex, which is one with a Google of zeros behind it, and a Google is a one with 100 zeros behind it, so it's a really big number. Or at least
You don't have to be a VIP to get more than just savings with Geico. Every customer gets 24/7 fast-friendly claim support.
Could I get a picture?
Yeah, it's not like you run into animal celebrities every...
Some days, all you want is an escape into sheets washed with down.
And ladies, if you ever oversleep, here's a shortcut.
Wait, is that the new Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 7? You're full of good calls.
Best call?
There is this one thing that Nintendo absolutely doesn't want to happen in Super Mario Maker 2. See, the whole level ecosystem is built upon trust. It's built upon the trust that every stage that is online can be beaten, since the creator of the stage was able to beat it too. Nintendo really doesn't want anyone to upload a level that is truly 100% absolutely no way to ever beat it impossible. Naturally, tons of people, myself included, immediately started to try to come up with a truly impossible level as soon as Mario Maker 2 got released. We already knew how to upload a 100% no way to beat it level in Super Mario Maker 1, so I assumed that uploading an impossible stage in Mario Maker 2 can't be that hard. I've never been that wrong. Wow, Nintendo really did their homework and fixed tons of potential exploits in the sequel. Nonetheless, they may have missed a small thing or two, which still at least gives us a chance to maybe upload a stage that can't be beaten. So today we're going to investigate this question. We'll discuss several different ideas on how an impossible level might be possible, and we will finally answer the eternal question: whether it is truly possible to upload a truly impossible level in Super Mario Maker 2. So you ready? Let's do this! Okay, so before we take a look at different ideas on how to upload an impossible level in Mario Maker 2, let's first quickly recap how we did it in the first Mario Maker. The general idea on how to get such a stage online is the following. We have to find the difference between playing a level to upload it and playing a stage once it is uploaded. The best way to do this in the first game was to just delete our save file and set Mario Maker back to version 1.0. In the very first version of the game, many glitches existed that Nintendo wrongfully patched as time moved on. The trick is the following. If we beat the stage once in order to upload it while in version 1.0, then the stage is still marked as cleared as soon as we update the game. This makes it possible to beat a stage that uses a glitch that later got patched. And as soon as the glitch is patched, the stage is no longer beatable. That's an actually surprisingly simple trick that easily allowed us to upload truly impossible levels in the first game. And this is also the first thing I tried when I got my hands onto Mario Maker 2. So I basically prepared a couple of different stages that were only beatable because of some weird glitches. I clear checked those levels and waited for 1.1 to roll around to finally upload the levels, which because of the patch should now have turned impossible. Basically the same trick as before. Here we used a super simple Magic Koopa glitch to create a not so impossible stage. For whatever reason, Magic Koopas were able to transform spike blocks in a 3D world style whenever they shot one of them with one of their evil PlayStation button missiles. The block stayed visible, but it also became possible to suddenly walk through it. I assumed that once Nintendo patched this glitch out, this stage turns unbeatable. But that's not what happened, because the level just stayed in version 1.0. It's just no longer possible to recreate the glitch in a new stage, but the glitch still exists in older levels, and in our loving memories, of course. Levels in Mario Maker 2 no longer update when the game updates. They stay on the old version of the game. What this means is that this stage here, for example, stays possible even though they patched the glitch. So generally speaking, Nintendo is surprisingly handling this issue in the correct way here, since leaving old levels on the old game version ensures that no stage breaks as soon as a patch hits, which is a really, really good idea. But sadly, it also means that we can't simply exploit old glitches anymore to upload a truly impossible level. As far as I can tell, absolutely all glitches and exploits that got patched locally. Locally, meaning that only new levels can't reproduce the glitch, while old ones are still allowed to weirdly glitch out as much as they want to. So this approach sadly does not work. Does it mean that it is impossible to upload an impossible level in Super Mario Maker 2? Well, not necessarily. See, the thing is Nintendo changed tons of things with the 1.1 patch. All that we have to do is to once again go back in time and to try to find a single thing that changed on a global level and therefore allows us to cheat their system once again. And this is where stuff gets a bit complicated, because as it turns out, it isn't that easy to get Mario Maker back to version 1.0 anymore. So I deleted all my local Mario Maker 1 saves and put in the game card. There is this one thing that Nintendo absolutely
Frame by frame animation is hard, but I think I found a way that can help it be easier. Smack Studio has a pixel art animation tool that helps speed up the animation process. You can create whatever kind of character you'd like. Maybe it has wings, 4 legs, maybe he rolls around, maybe it's just a Cheeto. Using their tool, you can also rotate your art in 3D, which is just really crazy to look at. All you need is your 2D art, and then add where you'd like their imaginary joints and bones to be. And now you can move them around. On this frame, I want him to do this, and then on this frame, I want him to do this. Now we have a timeline for our animation. Now we could go back in and clean up the animation since the program doesn't perfectly understand our character and their 3D depth. But once our animation is complete, we can export our sprite sheet to use in whatever projects you like. I think one of the cool things about Smack Studio is no matter what, you maintain the complete rights to your character, even if you upload it to their own fighting game, or if you use it in your own projects. It's your art, and you get to keep it. Frame by
A game dev secret about palette swaps. Look at my fancy Birdman. This dashing fellow is an enemy in Isadora's Edge, and he's wearing a cute little emerald suit. But what if I wanted Isadora to fight two of him on the screen at the same time? Now, I could just drop in 2 copies of this guy on the map, but that might be a little bit hard to follow since they look identical. And instead, I can use the age-old technique of a palette swap. Now, a palette swap is very simply where you change the colors of an enemy. So let's say I wanted to give this second Birdman a nice ruby red suit instead of his green one. Now, I could go into my pixel art program and painstakingly change every frame to have the right colors, but that would be extremely annoying. And we'd have to deal with having multiple sprite files in the game for the same enemy. Now, the real solution for this is a shader. In our shader, we can supply an in palette and an out palette. The in palette is the original color palette of the enemy, and the out palette is our new palette swap. Then, the shader checks every pixel on the sprite to find out which color it is in the original palette and change it to the matching corresponding color in the new palette. This makes creating a palette swap extremely easy, which lets me make lots of pretty clothes for my nice Birdman. So if you're making an indie game, give shaders a try.
This is how to get OP brainrot.
This is how I legally scammed TikTok, of all companies. Basically, I don't like TikTok. I mean, I like the app, I use it a lot, but when I post on TikTok, my videos don't do well. Not only that, but 2 years ago, TikTok made it to where you could only get paid on your videos if they were over a minute. The problem was, at the time, shorts could only be under a minute. And since I didn't want to make a longer TikTok version of every short, the decision was easy. Until I got a genius idea. Other creators were starting to find workarounds to make their shorts longer than 1 minute to post on TikTok. Some people would slow the video down at the end. Some people would just straight up add a black screen, but I wanted to do something funnier. My first method was adding an annoying 20-second outro to one of my shorts. And although it was really funny and let me get paid, I knew I couldn't do it again. The second method was, fuck it, let's try the black screen method. It actually kind of worked well, I won't lie. This TikTok made me $3,000, and the stupid part is, it would have made nothing if I didn't add the black screen. But the third method was by far the funniest. The reoccurring jump scare. What if at the end of every single TikTok, I would show the same image over and over to make it a minute long? The image would have to be funny, random, and make no sense though. I guess at the time I was playing Persona 5, so I just made the image my favorite character from that game, and this is what my TikTok looked like for that month. I had to choose that name because Royal Pair was taken. So I'm gonna give this 4.5 out of 5 stars.
I added tetanus to Minecraft. It's unrealistic that blocks can float like this, so I made them.
I want to tell you about
$4,000 from one TikTok. Just grifting.
This is Deathink, an Office-themed roguelike that has changed a lot over the years, but the current state of the game might be the most boring one yet. Where previously there was always some kind of gameplay, now there's just a table. So today we're going to be fixing that by adding some Office-themed enemies to the game. But actually, we won't, because these aren't the enemies we're making today, these are. And that may seem like a bit of a confusing choice. After all, why would making literal square enemies be better than making ones that actually look good and fit the Office theme? Well, it's because it's not really about the squares, it's about what they represent. You see, every enemy idea for this game has always been something like this. It's a guy named Gregory, who is always on his phone, and his attack is throwing his phone at the player. And on the surface, this doesn't even really seem like a bad idea, until you realise it's the wrong way around. Instead of designing based on gameplay, it's designed based on a story, a character, visuals, which leads to a game that may look good, but feels horrible to play. And that's exactly what happened to my game over the past 2 years, and I think this might be the solution. So here's what I want to know. Does stripping an enemy of its visuals actually fix these problems? And does just focusing on the gameplay allow me to finally design good enemies? Or does it all just lead to bad enemies that happen to be square? In the end, there's only one way to find out. But before we can actually get to that, there's something else I need to fix first. You see, the old enemies had a problem. Something that's been annoying me for the past 2 years, but I always thought was too hard to fix. What I'm talking about is their pathfinding. But that's a bit misleading, because they were always able to find their path perfectly. And even now, if you make an enemy in our current project and use the exact same pathfinding plugin, you can see that it's still able to easily find a path towards the player. The problem is how the enemy then follows that path, because instead of actually following it, the enemy just kind of slides in its general direction. You can see it very clearly in these old enemies. They're supposed to be running towards you, but it feels more like they're kind of sliding on ice. The reason for this is that both enemies are using the built-in movement script that comes with the plugin, and the way this script works is that it just keeps adding a force that moves the enemy in the right direction, but it never actually slows the enemy down, it just kind of keeps adding more and more force. So to make sure that it doesn't fly off, it uses Unity's linear drag system, which you can compare to air resistance slowing it down, and though it fixes the enemy just flying off, it also causes this imperfect movement. And sadly, because it's coded like this, the only way I can fix it is by writing my own movement script. Luckily, Brackeys has a tutorial on exactly how to do this, but the code he writes enemies uses the exact same linear drag technique. As you can see, the bird in the video moves exactly the way we don't want our enemies to move. So I had to make some adjustments. Instead of adding a force, we're going to be setting the velocity of the enemy. And although it's a bit more inflexible, it just gives us exact control over where the enemy goes. However, by making it more exact, we also made it more choppy, because whenever the path updates, the enemy immediately moves in that new direction, with no regard to where it was moving before, which also doesn't feel right. So to fix that, we need to smooth between the direction we are currently moving and the direction we're supposed to be moving. And this is fairly easy. We just check what our current direction is, what direction we're supposed to be moving in, and put them both in a lerp function. This means that every frame, the enemy moves a slight bit more in the right direction, until it eventually follows the path perfectly again. And if we make this amount of moves per frame high enough, it's barely even noticeable that the two are different. And surprisingly, this code actually worked first time, and I was so close to just moving on when this happened. And just in case you can't tell, that is us, the player, somehow being able to walk all the way around the table and start to chase the enemy instead. And what's happening here is such a weird bug, because the game knows there's a shorter path, and officially, the enemy is following that path. In fact, that's the only thing it can do. The entire script is just go to path, period. It's not go to path unless the player walks all the way around the table, then just keep following an old path that you don't know, is not saved anywhere, and doesn't exist anymore. And I know I'm joking about it now, but this was something that literally shouldn't have been possible, and yet somehow it still happened. Not just once either, like I was able to recreate this bug very consistently, which just made it even more confusing. However, after a lot of testing, I did figure out one thing. It was only happening if I was using the direction smoothing. If I turned it off, it would go back to normal. But because I really couldn't think of why that had anything to do with following an old path, I did something I've never done before. I used gizmos. Now, for those of you that don't know what gizmos are, they're these lines, colors, and shapes that are only visible in the editor. And they're mostly used for visualizing something that is happening in a script. And I thought this might help me identify what was going on. So I made two gizmos, one for the current direction in yellow, and one for the path direction in red. And this finally showed me what was happening. You see, every time the enemy had to turn around, the path... This is Death Inc., an office-themed roguelike that I started working on more than 2 years ago. And although it's changed a lot since then, there is one thing that has stayed consistent throughout, and that's the game's genre. Whether it's me saying it in the first couple seconds of every video, or me putting it in basically every title, I've been advertising this game as a roguelike since the very start. But as I've come to realise, that might have been a mistake, because when I chose this genre 2 years ago, I failed to realise one very important thing. I don't like roguelikes. I've never liked them. It's not a genre I enjoy playing. Even the game that I've been using as the inspiration for this project, Enter the Gungeon, I have less than 10 hours in. I think it's a fine game, but I don't love it, and it took me way too long to realise how much me not liking roguelikes has been hurting this game. For example, I've been really struggling to come up with fun gameplay, and if you consider that I don't even like the genre of the gameplay I'm trying to make, it's no surprise I was struggling. So over the past month, I've completely let go of the roguelike label, and have just been focusing on trying to make a game that I would actually enjoy playing. And here's how it went. I started by making a very simple office environment. I mean, it's literally just a square, but like I said, very simple. I then added some smaller yellow squares that I put on the edges of the bigger square, and implemented an old procedural generation script, which allows us to now walk from square to square. And even though technically this is now a fully generated environment, it doesn't actually feel like you're going anywhere. And that's because there's nothing to indicate where you are. It's just one giant void. So to try and fix that, I started working on a minimap. Now I have no idea if there's an easier way to do this, but what I did was generate a second, smaller version of the office using simple white squares that I put like y minus 1,000 in our scene. I then aimed a camera at it and turned that into an overlay camera.
Trump is
and now
economy and
technically
taxes.
speaking, we have a minimap. Only it's covering the entire screen and not actually showing where we are, which is pretty essential. So I limited it to a small space in the corner and made the room you're currently in green. And although this is basically all we need, I also wanted to show where you've already been and where you can still go. So I made rooms that you haven't visited yet completely invisible, and rooms that you can currently go to slightly transparent. Then once you actually visit a room, it'll turn white to indicate that you've now been there. And as a final detail, I also added these connections between rooms to show whether two rooms are actually connected to each other by a door or not. And this is looking really good. It shows you where you are, where you can go, and where you've been. But it only does so for like a couple rooms, since the minimap is, well, mini. So to solve this, I also added a full-sized map that you can view by pressing tab. This map shows you every single room that you've discovered and every single room that you can still go to. And for some reason, just having a map like this actually makes the environment feel much more real. I don't really know why, but suddenly it feels like I'm actually walking through a real space, even if it literally is just a couple squares. But you might actually be wondering why I'm even making this to begin with. We're no longer making a roguelike, so why do we need a procedural environment? Well, let me explain it to you. Previously, the idea was that you'd start at the first floor of the office, and you would try to fight your way all the way to the top. Then, when you die at any point, you can turn all the way back down to the bottom, and you try again, repeating that cycle over and over. But the new idea is a little different. We still have a randomly generated office, and you still start at the bottom. But at the end of every floor, you get a choice. Do you want to stay and continue on to the next floor, or do you want to leave and return to your base? Now, I'll explain more about this base thing later, but the important thing is that instead of then having to start all the way back from the bottom again, you can choose to re-enter the office at any floor you've already visited. And not only that, you can bring all of your gear with you back into the office. The only twist is that when you do die, you lose everything you took with you. This creates a really interesting risk-reward situation. Do you take your best gear and risk it all to be able to defeat better enemies and get even better gear, or do you take some worthless junk with you, not risking anything, but making the combat significantly harder for yourself? I think this is way more interesting than just losing everything always when you die. Instead, now you get to choose what you're willing to lose. So I hope that kind of gives you an idea of what we're going to be doing differently with the game going forward, and it also explains why we do still need the procedural environment, even if we're not making a roguelike. Anyway, with this very basic environment done, it's time to start adding some new stuff to the game. And the first thing I want to add is something gun related. However, the only gun we have right now is not exactly subtle. It's basically a giant shotgun, and I'd like something a little bit more simple for this. So I designed a new gun. Now, I'm still trying to kind of figure out the art style I want to use for the guns in this game, so for this one I tried something new. It's supposed to look like a weird prototype computer-esque gun, and I don't think it looks terrible, but I definitely have to get some feedback on the design design. However, when it comes to the gameplay, it's just about as simple as it can get. It shoots one regular-sized bullet at a very standard firebase. Basically, it's the perfect gun for the next thing we're going to make, which are mods. Now, the way these mods are going to work is actually pretty basic. For example, you'll be able to equip a mod that adds fire rate to your weapon, and now you can shoot faster. Or you can equip a mod that increases your weapon's damage or projectile speed, basic things like that. But I'd also like to include some weirder ones, like a mod that turns all your bullets into exploding chickens, or one that makes every projectile 3 times. Their original size, just silly things like that. However, if we want to be able to do all of those things, we're going to need a good, robust system that can actually handle it. Which means we first of all need a way to store all of the information about the mod in one single place. And luckily Unity has a great thing for that called scriptable objects. In here we can store information like the mod's name, description, visuals, and everything else we need. Then when we need to know something about a specific mod, we simply ask the scriptable object for that information. And although this is literally all we need for a simple mod that, for example, adds damage, it's not going to be enough for a mod with more complicated behavior. For that we're going to have to use custom scripts, because in those I can adjust literally anything I want, and all I need for them to work is attach them to a gun object. But this was actually more complicated than I thought it would be. After all, I attach scripts to objects all the time, but doing so when the game is running isn't actually that easy. Because although I can put a script reference in my mod, that only works for one specific script. But I need to be able to attach literally any script I want to my gun. So I tried solving this for literal days, and it turned out to actually be quite a difficult task. But the thing that solved it eventually was this piece of code from a random stranger on the internet. Because what it does is it converts the name of the script in the form of a string to a component type that I can actually attach to an object, which means that all I need in my mod is the name of the script, and the game can figure it out from there. And of course, by the game can figure it out, I mean the mod manager that took me multiple hours to write can figure it out. Let's get back to it. Okay, so whenever you kill an enemy, it will of course have a chance of dropping stuff. But what exactly will that stuff be? I think it's pretty obvious it'll have a chance of dropping the mods we made earlier, but what else? Now, you might actually already know the answer, because there's a chance you saw it in the sponsored segment earlier, because in this board, lining out the mechanics of the game, there are two things that I haven't talked about yet: resources and boosts. Now, resources seem pretty self-explanatory. They're things like coins, wood, paper, ink, coffee, or whatever other resources I can come up with. But boosts might need a little bit more clarification. Basically, they're just like mods, but more powerful, apply to the player instead of a specific weapon, and most importantly, are temporary. But what exactly does that mean? Well, let's take this boost as an example. If you pick it up, you get an increase of 50% to your movement speed. And as long as you keep playing and continue your run, you'll keep this 50% boost. But if at any point you decide to leave the office and go back to your base, the boost will be lost entirely. The point of this is that you're rewarded for doing longer runs and taking more risk. As you get more boost the longer you play, and the more boost you have, the more powerful you become. Now, most likely there will be some kind of cap on the amount of boost you can have active at once, but even so, this system should make the decision on whether to stay or leave much more interesting. Okay, so now it's time to put all of this together. So, a very random boost. Later on, this will also be influenced by
These Lego gummies are not real. Seriously, do not eat them. I'm here at a Lego convention where one of the vendors is actually selling these gummy bear lookalikes that look like gummy bears, but they're really made of Lego bricks. I've seen these Lego gummy bears at other Lego conventions before, and they are always really cool to see because of how lifelike they are, but this time they've actually...
People who pick post-university choose our 100% online Master of Education program so they can learn practical skills from real-world professionals, making a difference in their own career and in the lives of their students. Are you a post person?
Hold on, before you pay for yet another app to manage your team, let me introduce you to Connect Team, the one platform that...
The 7 levels of game developers, where level 0 is a baby game developer and level 7 is a genius god tier developer that puts everyone else on this list to shame. Level 0. When you think about baby game development, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
I spent 1 month making a Steam game called Gunfrog, and this month was by far the most profitable and exciting month in my game dev journey so far. The month started with me getting a message from Blackthorn Prod, one of the biggest game development channels on YouTube. It was an invitation to participate in a game dev competition. In this competition, 6 game developers would compete for $5,000 US. The competition would last 3 weeks total, with an elimination round at the end of each week. I was a little hesitant to participate at first because I had a lot on my hands with my main project, Grapples Galore. The main reason I decided to participate is because of my main project though. I spent around 4 years working on the same game, and it's still not done. Because of that, I've been feeling a little burnt out from development lately. This competition was a good opportunity to finally work on something new. On the first day of the competition, they announced the theme we need to create a game around, Momentum. With Grapples Galore being a physics-based movement shooter, I was pretty confident I could make something cool with this theme. A couple months ago, I learned a development approach that I knew would help me a lot during this competition. When I was working on a game called Schrodinger with some friends, we incorporated Valve's approach to playtests. They playtest every single day and always base what they work on off of those playtest results. This approach drastically improved Schrodinger and would be my biggest asset during this competition. With this approach in mind, I spent the first day making an active ragdoll frog and some bouncy trampolines to gain momentum on. Throughout the week though, because of playtest results, I slowly iterated the concept into something far more interesting. I gave the frog a gun to allow for more gameplay depth. Then I removed the trampolines in favor of bouncy lily pads and built out a little open world. I also added flies so the player has something to do with their gun, and these flies would double as a currency. I was pretty happy with that mechanic because it felt very unique. I also added a bunch of NPCs to interact with, such as this ammo dealer and this wizard. I even managed to add a boss fight at the end of the week. With all this progress already, I was pretty confident going into the first elimination round. It was still nerve-wracking regardless, but I managed to get through to the second round of development. I was feeling ambitious during the second week, and I knew I wanted to add 2 new boss fights and 2 new corresponding areas. This sort of scope was only possible because of my game's art style. When designing it, I was thinking heavily about a GDC talk I watched about the development of a short hike. In that talk, the developer explains how he created a time-efficient art style. By focusing on interesting shaders and cute simple graphics, he didn't need to spend too much time creating individual assets. I applied this concept to my game's art. There are also a lot of small imperfections in the art style of my game, but I think that gives it a lot of charm. I always appreciate that rough around the edges, handcrafted look in indie games. Here's how the new areas and boss fights ended up looking. I also made some smaller enemies. To tie this new content all together, I needed to rethink the gameplay loop. I needed a reason for all of the boss fights, so I made these shrines without some of them. The initial way players would activate them was by sacrificing flies, but after playtesting this, I knew I had to change that. I didn't want collecting flies to feel like the sole focus of the game. I kind of just wanted them to feel like a currency. I improved the shrines by adding 3 buttons in each area. When you shoot all of them, a shrine rises out of the ground, and a wave of small enemies spawn. After you beat all of the smaller enemies, a boss spawns, and once you defeat a boss, a boat appears that'll take you to the next area. These extra steps made the gameplay feel far more diverse. For the sake of better player guidance, I still needed an overarching goal for the game, so I put this portal in the starting area. It only activates once you beat all of the shrines, and behind it is where King Toad will be. When designing bosses for the game, I would Google what animals eat frogs, and one that stuck out for me was other frogs and toads. I thought a giant toad would be a really cool final boss for this reason. I also added this grandma frog to the starting area that tells you a little bit about him, so players immediately have some sort of goal. This week we were also given a surprise theme by another contestant. I was given the theme Ring, which was fortunately not the biggest curveball. I repurposed the wizard and wizard tower I made in the first week and moved them to the third area. Here the wizard sells you a ring that allows you to double jump. With all this done, I managed to get through to the final week. In this final week, I somehow managed to finish Gunfrog. I added the final boss King Toad in his castle. I also wanted to add one more area before King Toad, so I created this last area and shrine. One of my favorite NPCs is in this area, this half-eaten toad. I also added a final cutscene and even set up a Steam page. Shout out to my friend Hamad for helping with the Steam art. I'm super proud of what I made in such a short period of time. When I joined the final elimination call, I was still super nervous though. The final game I was up against was Randy the Raccoon, a fast-paced, chaotic driving game. However, in the final elimination call, one judge voted for Randy the Raccoon and 2 judges voted for Gunfrog. I was so relieved and happy after this call. All of the other games were super cool and this competition was super fun. Randy the Raccoon and Particle Accelerator both have Steam pages, so be sure to check them out. I didn't want to spend too much more time on the game post-competition since I want to get back to Grapples Galore, so my plan was to spend one last week finalizing the game and then release it onto Steam. I started by setting the game up for localization and sent some friends Excel sheets so they could help me with translations. Afterwards, I added controller support and some Steam achievements. I also made a few gameplay changes, like giving the player 2 health instead of 1. I made a few other changes too, but I don't want to give away too much. After only 1 month, Gunfrog was ready for a Steam release. But I wanted to set up a business for this game's release. This can take a while, and I've been waiting 2 months for this. This period of waiting has been really exciting too though. Me and the friends I made Schrodinger with went to the Swedish Game Awards and managed to win Best Technology. We also got 2 other nominations, including Student Game of the Year. I've also continued development on Grapples Galore and have some exciting new content in the works. Once the Blackthorn Prod video dropped, it was super fun to watch and see what everyone thought of my game. All of the comments were super nice, and a good number of wishlists rolled in too. Fortunately, for everyone who wishlisted the game, today I got the news that my business is set up. This means I can finally release Gunfrog. If you want to play it for yourself, there's a link in the description. Let me know what you think of the game in the comments. I had a really fun time making it.